Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 225 of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is Courageously Vulnerable, an interview with Crystal Hefner. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
Matt, this is a really cool interview, and I think our community is going to enjoy learning about how Crystal Hefner did not initially follow her intuition or her body signals, which put her in a vulnerable position. She did not recognize the challenges that she created for herself by living in a mold-infested castle, as well as having breast implants. And more importantly, she didn't realize that she could shortcut her journey until she started to begin to model other people who had been successful on their Lyme disease journeys.
Rich, I couldn't agree more. The part that makes Crystal's story so powerful is the fact that she treated with many of the world's top Lyme doctors, but yet was only successful because she kept researching and following her own signals her body was sending her. Crystal had to address various other things going on in her body to allow her body to finally heal from Lyme disease, and she found and treated those things and is now on track to getting into remission.
So, Matt, we've known that antibiotics are a really important tool in a Lyme disease journey, but we've also recognized that if your body isn't prepared to begin the Lyme disease battle itself, meaning if your immune system cannot take over the battle, you're not going to heal. And that's one of the really important lessons that we've learned here from Crystal Hefner. So, Matt, without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce to our community Crystal Hefner. Hey, Crystal Hefner, and welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Hi, thank you both for having me.
We're really excited to have you on the podcast. And, you know, there are a lot of celebrities that have Lyme disease, and we are certainly never critical of anyone who would be triggered by talking about their journey and therefore not as active in the community as we would sometimes want them to be. But you're one of the folks who have used your platform, probably more than anyone else, to bring awareness to this. So we want to begin by thanking you for being kind enough to being so active in this community and bringing as much awareness as you are to this community. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I want to try harder and keep getting the word out. So thank you.
All right. So let's make that next step in your getting the word out, this podcast.
Yeah.
So Crystal, talk to us about what it was like to grow up in Arizona, or at least that portion of your life where you were, I guess a desert gal.
Oh, well, I wasn't a desert gal for long. So my parents are British, and they wanted to have me in America so I'd be a citizen because they eventually wanted to come back. So I was born in Lake Havasu, Arizona. My mom wanted to have me there because there's a replica of the London Bridge. So my early childhood was spent kind of more in England.
Okay.
But from there, it was rainy and overcast all the time. I would always, get colds as a kid because, it's just always rainy and damp. So coming to America was really nice. We came to San Diego, and San Diego is such a great place to grow up. And then at 21, I came to Los Angeles. So Southern California, mostly.
So I understand your dad is a musician. And so talk to us about what it was like to grow up the child of a musician.
It was nice. It was fun. It was great to go to his shows and just hang out as a kid. And I really idolized him, and so did a lot of other people. So it was really fun.
So clearly the artistic genes were strong because they rolled over into Crystal Hefner, and you've been an entertainer for a good portion of your career. Now I understand now you're currently working as a travel blogger, and I want to spend some time talking about that a little bit later. I'd like to focus on the early portions of your career. So talk to us about what drove you into the entertainment industry, and when did you first start to feel the artistic genes that your parents passed on to you?
Gosh, well, I came into the industry as a model, and I entered into the Playboy world. So I met Hugh Hefner in 2008, and that was kind of my foray into entertainment and celebrity and Hollywood. And it was fun. It was exciting. There's definitely ups and downs, which I learned along the way. But yeah, it was nice to be a part of, and I ended up parlaying that into other things like real estate and travel, and so now I'm doing those things full time.
So we do have to spend a couple of minutes focusing on Hugh Hefner. He's one of America's greatest icons. So how did you meet him, and how did you begin your relationship with him?
I met him at a Halloween party in 2008, and we started talking. He asked me, what I did. And I said, I'm at San Diego State. I'm a psychology major. Then he told me he was a psychology major at the University of Illinois. And, it kind of took off from there. And I ended up moving into the mansion and, into that lifestyle, which, like I mentioned, had its ups and downs. Hef was a great person, but at the same time, there was a lot of rules and not, I ended up not being able to be I was kind of more living for somebody else and somebody else's life eventually. And I think that kind of didn't help me for when I got sick.
Yeah, I would think that those types of stresses would be difficult, but of course there was a lot to learn while you were there as well, and I'm sure that has served you well in your career as an entertainer. So talk about some of the other things you've done in the entertainment industry. You were on various television programs. You were a designer and also a TV, model. So talk to us about, your acting, your modeling, your designing. I mean, you have this diverse array of artistic talents. I'd like you to explore some of that with us.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, at first, I had a lot of fun. I created a bikini line. I created a clothing line that was kind of more loungewear. Because I noticed going to all these parties and getting all dressed up that it really wasn't my, I liked things more relaxed, more comfortable. So I did end up with the loungewear line. I got into real estate while I was at the mansion. The money that I was making from modeling and the clothing lines, I would just turn into buying houses. I would also do appearances as a playmate. And I would show up to these appearances and I'm like, okay, I show up and take pictures with people, but I need to bring some kind of talent. So I learned how to DJ. And from there, I ended up with a residency at the Hard Rock in Las Vegas at their rehab pool parties. So, I had a lot of fun, but it definitely started slowing down.
So let's talk about first, when you first started to notice the symptoms of what you now know to be your Lyme disease.
Let's see. I was working a lot on social media stuff. I'd have a lot of brand partnerships. I'd do a lot of photo shoots. I would always stay busy. Then all of a sudden I just started canceling things. Like, oh, I feel so lazy. Like, oh, I don't feel well. I feel so lazy. I don't know why. I just don't feel like it today. So I started cutting down things that I would do and lighten my schedule a lot more. And I think it really started with the fatigue, and then it started with stomach issues.
So now, Crystal, you shared with us that you were very busy, right? I think if you had two ends of your candle, you were probably burning it on eight ends, right? I mean, you were just a very, very busy person doing a lot of different things. When you first started to feel this fatigue, did you believe it? Did you believe that you were overworking yourself, or did you believe that it was something else going on?
I didn't know. I'm like, okay, I'm like, oh, I'm 20, however old I was then, like late 20s. Like, I feel like too young to feel this old. I didn't know what was happening. I just thought like, oh, I'm my star sign's a Taurus. So I'm like, oh, I'm just kind of lazy, I guess. I didn't know. I didn't know what was happening. But then I started having other things like stomach issues. Like everything I ate would start a war in my stomach. And I didn't think that was normal either, because it was new.
So, Crystal, when did you first start to see doctors to help you to define what was causing your health issues, your fatigue, and it seems like it was very severe fatigue, and your stomach issues?
I saw a doctor for the stomach issues, because I didn't know what doctor to go to for fatigue. Like I didn't know. So I went to a stomach doctor, and he prescribed me some antibiotics for, I don't know, some kind of bacteria in the stomach, and he said, if it doesn't get better, then it's just stress, or I don't know. I got some waste basket diagnosis, we call it. So then I was sent to a more holistic doctor, a holistic gastrointestinologist, like named Dr. Rabar, and that was in Los Angeles, and he started me on all the tests. every like bodily anything that someone can test, he gave me. And he also asked me at the time if I'd ever been tested for Lyme disease. And I said, no, I didn't know what that was. And he said, well, the test is $1,500 at that time. I think it's a lot more affordable now, but it was $1,500. And, you know, it would rule out having Lyme disease. And I asked how you get it. And he said, it's from ticks. And, you know, I said, I'm not around a tick. I grew up in Southern California, you know, on the beach. There's no ticks. I've never seen a tick in my life. And
so let's pause there. Let's pause there for a second, because I think that's an important part of your journey, but it's also important that we share that with everyone. So, so you were approximately 29 years old when you had gotten your early symptoms, and you finally got a diagnosis somewhere in the neighborhood when you were 35. So there was
no, it was in 2015. So I don't know how.
Yeah, so
See, I'm like, I can't even brain fog still.
So you were probably oh no, I'm sorry, you're 35 now. So
35. I was late 20s, somewhere in there.
Okay.
It was in 2015, very late 2015, early 2016.
So how long was it between the time that you first started showing your symptoms and you finally got your Lyme disease diagnosis? Let's look at that.
Okay. So that would be, the symptoms were in around October 2015. And then the official diagnosis was in January 2016.
Okay. So before you got your diagnosis, you met with a doctor who suggested that perhaps you should be looking at Lyme disease. You had this waste paper basket type of diagnosis where you had really a nothing diagnosis despite having all these symptoms. So you were believed to be sick, but they didn't know why. The doctor said, hey, we should test you for Lyme disease. And your response was, why would I be tested for Lyme disease?
Yeah.
There's no Lyme disease here, right?
Yeah.
And it's not as if, Crystal, you didn't have resources, right? If the $1,500 wasn't going to break the bank for you, you just decided that you weren't going to take the test because you just didn't think there was any possibility that someone who had lived the life that you had lived, born in Arizona, raised in the UK, living in San Diego, then in Los Angeles, that you would have ever been around ticks, correct?
Correct.
And there was nothing that you had ever learned during any time in your educational experience, nor did you ever learn anything while you were training in this entertainment world that you were living in. I mean, you were getting your MBA by watching some of the most brilliant, business professionals in the world. Nothing ever came to you that led you to believe that perhaps you had come in contact with a tick that could have caused you to suffer Lyme disease.
Not at all. I'd never, ever heard of checking for ticks or preventing ticks, I have nothing.
Now, what was the doctor's response to you when he said to you, hey, you have this waste basket set of diagnoses. We put you through a whole battery of tests. We don't really know what's wrong with you. We want you to take the Lyme disease test. You say no. What did he say to you?
Like, okay, we'll go do all these other tests. We'll run these other tests, which were all expensive as well. It's like the pee test, the poop test, the blood test, the spit tests. And so he ran all of those and, found all different things wrong. The adrenals were failing. The hormones were failing. The thyroid was failing. Gosh, I mean, I laugh now, but back then it's like, are you serious? Like, how could this many things be wrong? Gosh, and then SIBO, the bacteria overgrowth in the stomach, leaky gut, it all came back. And then he said, all of these are pretty much Lyme disease symptoms. Can we test you for it? Now will you do it? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I tested for Lyme disease and, started on all the supplements that they gave me. Then the Lyme disease, it came back positive with Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like now I know what I have. It's Lyme disease. And then I'm thinking, all right, which medicine is he going to give me? Just thinking he was going to hand me a prescription, but instead he handed me a referral for a different doctor.
Just to be clear, because I think from doing our research and our chat offline, it sounds like you first saw a regular gastrointestinal doctor who is the one who gave you your first wastebasket diagnosis, and then you went to a more holistic doctor who recommended the IGeneX test, correct?
Yes.
And then your holistic doctor is the one who diagnosed you and then still referred you to another specialist, even though they were a holistic doctor who probably was more well-versed in Lyme than traditional doctors.
Yes, yes. He referred me to a woman in Beverly Hills, Dr. Lehman. So so I thought, okay, this might be kind of serious. If he's not just giving me a medication, he's sending me to a whole different specialist. And that's when it kind of, I got this sinking feeling, because most of my life, anything that happened to me, you just take medicine and it goes away. Anything, cold or random things, like I've had like a couple urinary tract things, you just take a medicine and you're done. And this is the first time that anything like this had ever happened to me where I'm like, okay, this is serious, that there's like this special doctor for it.
Crystal, talk to us about the system-wide failures you were referring to earlier. So you mentioned that you had all kinds of things going on, like your adrenals were failing and a lot of other things in your body. What kind of symptoms were you exhibiting as your disease progressed? Give us an idea of the types of neurological and physiological symptoms you were experiencing.
Oh my gosh, I guess I actually have a list. I'll just read it off if that's okay.
Definitely.
I remember just writing down, let's see, health, current symptoms, zaps in brain, clicking in wrist, popping bones, joint pain, tendon pain, bladder pain, bone pain in the ankles, hot vein, rush feeling in my back. Just would feel like my whole back's on fire. Heart palpitations, night sweats, can't regulate body temperature, neck stiffness, mood swings, depression, food allergies, weight loss, hair loss, severe fatigue, muscle spasms, balance issues, vertigo, jumpy, anxious.
So it sounds like your Lyme disease progressed so bad that it actually was in your heart, meaning you had Lyme carditis with the heart palpitations, that you had neurological Lyme, it was in your brain as well, and it caused you to have POTS or dysautonomia, I can't pronounce the word, but POTS, where you're having all kinds of your symptoms going on, like where you can faint and get dizzy and things like that. So no doctor prior to your holistic doctor ever thought Lyme disease with all these really common Lyme symptoms that you had?
No, like a lot of people say, most doctors don't know much about it, it seems. And then you just feel like you're well, hello, I'm obviously sick. That's where a lot of people get it. It's in your head, and you're just like, I can't, like gravity's way heavier. Something is not in my head.
But that's a good question, Crystal. Did you ever believe that possibly this was all psychological?
Yeah, definitely. I'm like, oh, I'm stressed out. I'm kind of trapped here at the mansion. It's kind of, I'm not really living life on my own terms completely. Like maybe it's just stress. Maybe, it's all catching up to me. You start convincing yourself what other people have told you.
And do you think you ever gaslit by your doctors, meaning that they were the ones kind of encouraging you to think that it was more psychological and not physical?
Oh, definitely gaslit.
So thankfully, you were referred to Dr. Lehman, who's a specialist in California that we are aware of. Talk to us about what that doctor's visit was like compared to what you would expect a normal doctor's visit to be like, prior to that.
Well, the doctor's visit with Dr. Lehman seemed like she knew exactly what to do and what she was doing. I immediately was started on antibiotics, maybe like 5 different kinds. One was bicillin that was injected directly in, and then the other ones were oral. Then she gave me different medications to help with any symptoms that the antibiotics created. And then she gave me thyroid, pig thyroid medication, creams. I was rubbing testosterone, progesterone, stuff for the adrenals, so many different supplements, like 40 different. When I first started researching Lyme disease, I would see all these people with like supplements everywhere. I'm like, wow, that's excessive. And that's because I had no idea, just like most people don't. But I'm like, oh, okay, this is normal. I'm right here with these people. The worst I ever felt was when I started treatment. And I thought, because I guess it makes you worse. The Herx thing, it makes you worse before you get better. So the worst I ever felt I remember thinking, okay, it's been a great life. I've had a lot of fun. Maybe, a lot of stuff happened to me early in life because this was coming up. And, I remember thinking at the end was happening, that my whole body was failing me, that there was no way I was going to pull out of it. But I did. At the time, I also had breast implants, which some people with Lyme disease do. And I remember calling Lugene Fang, who I know took out Yolanda Foster's implants. I'm like, okay, she's got to be good at it. And I remember calling the office crying, like, I'm dying. I'm gonna die if I don't get these implants out. Because this bacteria overload, and then your immune system's constantly fighting these foreign objects in your body. And I remember Dr. Lehman saying, if you don't take the implants out, you're never going to get fully better, because your immune system has something else is working on fighting something else as well. So that was probably the beginning of 2016 when I started treatment to June 16 was probably the hardest 6 months of my life. But once I got the implants taken out, and Lu Jingfeng was so careful, and she was saying that she has open heart surgery tools that she makes sure to scrape it all off the chest wall, and she just makes sure to get everything out, rebuild the muscle. I was in there for 5 hours, and when I came out, I just felt lighter. My lungs felt twice as big, and I felt so much better. And I'm like, okay, if I can feel so much better from this, maybe as I continue, I'll only get better from here. So
Chris, I want to just backtrack a little bit there. So when you first saw Dr. Lehman and you treated aggressively with the wide variety of antibiotics and other supplements to boost a lot of other systems in your body, you mentioned that you had a really bad Herxheimer reaction and you literally thought you were going to die at that point. Now, were you warned that was going to happen from the aggressive treatment protocol that you were given?
Yes, I was definitely warned that as the bugs die off, you're going to piss them off, and, you might get worse. And she gave me certain things for herxing, and, okay, stop this if it gets really bad. So I just, she gave me Alka-Seltzer Gold, which really helped. The sodium bicarbonate really helped the herxing. And I forget exactly what else. But that, because it was a while ago, and I've been treating since then. So, yeah, herxing is so weird, and again, something that was completely new to me.
So I wonder, Crystal, if as you were killing the bacteria, if you were sort of at a disadvantage compared to somebody else, because you were having toxin die off from the bacteria dying from Lyme and co-infections that you had, the Bartonella and the Babesia, plus you had these toxic bags in you too that were probably filled with mold and all kinds of toxins that your body was attacking. So do you think that you really just weren't able to receive the treatment properly with Dr. Lehman because of the breast implants, and that really you weren't going to make any progress at all until you got them removed?
Completely, 100%. I didn't think I could get all the way better until the implants were removed. And I see people today that are really sick and posting on social media, and the women do have implants, and it's I don't want to be the one to tell people what to do with their lives, but it really helped me it was that next step to get them taken out. But also, where I was living inside the Playboy mansion, I found lots of mold there, because Dr. Lehman said I should test where I live, and it was owned by the company at that point, and I just thought, okay, if I ask the company to do it, maybe it'll be hidden from me. So I hired somebody Dr. Lehman recommended, and he came over and he went in all the vents and everywhere. He was amazing, and he found fungus, mold. The mantua was mostly built out of concrete, which is kind of rare. Usually it's wood, but mold all through to the concrete. It ended up being a $2.5 million mold remediation on, Playboy paid for. So
now, Crystal,
I had it all.
Again, it sounds like you had all the cards stacked against you, unfortunately, where you had various co-infections, you had mold exposure, you had toxic breast implants. Now, was Dr. Lehman recognizing that you were having all these toxins going on and giving you things like binders and supportive detox tools to at least support your body until you can get the breast implants removed?
Yes, I was taking a lot of binders. I take cholestyramine. I took, now I think it's different. Like, okay, maybe that one doesn't work. Lots of charcoal. I forget what other binders, but it's hard. Around that time, it's almost like, you're kind of a guinea pig. Like, okay, does this going to work for you? Okay, it's not. Try this one. Or well call. I remember being given that for the mold, but it was just, it's crazy how the perfect storm could happen. You just have no idea that it's coming.
And before we get back to the breast implants, was there anything that helped you at all that's noteworthy for our listeners that gave you some sort of relief before the explant surgery?
Gosh. The only thing that really I could have really done during that time is just kind of, I deactivated all my social media. I didn't want to feel like I had to keep up with anything. I tried to make my life as simple as possible, do things that I enjoyed, that I could do, even just being outside, when the sun was nice. When you're that sick, it's really hard. So it's just the little things, I guess.
So, Crystal, let's talk about the breast implants. So when did you get the breast implants?
I got the breast implants in, 2007 or 6. I remember that I had them around 8 years by that point. And every single year after I had the implants in, I would get these surveys in the mail, and they would, we'll pay you $25 if you like to. And I would just do the survey anyway, like, everything's going great. Like, how do you feel? Great. Fatigue. No. And I didn't think anything of the surveys. And I took them for maybe 5 years in a row, 6 years in a row. Then they stopped coming. And then I got sick. I'm like, oh, I wish I could rewind and it's gonna be like miserable coming up. But now this poor Allergan was the company that made them, but now this company has these records of patients that say everything's fine. But where were the surveys for years 6, 7, 8? I don't know.
So Crystal, before you had the implants installed, did anybody ever give you a warning that perhaps having the implants put in could cause you to suffer immune disruption?
Absolutely not. Nobody told me any of that.
So
I had no idea. But thinking back now that you learn and you realize, okay, the thing you're putting in your body isn't of the earth. It isn't natural. It isn't. It's silicone. It's ingredients like talc, formaldehyde. Yeah, you're gonna get sick.
But until you had a sort of a combination of events, you were doing okay with the breast implants, meaning you didn't feel anything after they had gotten put in, and you were taking surveys over a regular period of time. And every time you answered the questions on the survey, you were feeling okay. So you were young and you were healthy, and your body was able to manage the breast implants until they couldn't, right? Now,
exactly.
When do you think, and we did in our research, we think that you were probably bitten by a tick at some particular time in your life. So when do you think that took place? Is that before or after you had the breast implants?
I like, for years I've been like racking my brain, like, okay, still, I remember I used to go hiking in the Malibu mountains, a hike called Temescal Canyon, and it takes about an hour, and you go through trees, and you don't think anything of it. I remember I had a trainer, and I would work out, and they're like, oh, so I can see what you're doing. Wear like crop pants. So I would wear the crop pants and then the low socks. So, my legs are showing. And so I'm brushing against. So I'm thinking maybe on the hike, maybe around 2008, end of 2008 or 2009, maybe I remember, because like, did I remember this, or am I just making it up to try and, but like, maybe I remember something that was like, I had to pick it off, like small, like a poppy seed, but I never remember a tick. I never remember a rash. And I don't know if like, maybe there was something. Because people say it can't be, transmitted other ways, but then some people say they can, so.
Yeah, there's certainly some debate in the community about whether or not sexual transmission is is a way of ultimately transmitting Lyme disease. There are some leading doctors like Alan McDonald, for example, feel very strongly that it can be transmitted sexually. And he cited recently some studies that have been done, at least in animal studies, where Lyme disease had been transmitted sexually. And we know for sure that Lyme disease can be transmitted congenitally from mother to child, and that the bacteria will pass through the placenta. So, there are certainly many ways that someone can get Lyme disease, but it's most likely from a tick bite. And of course, we know it's hard to find ticks biting us, especially if we weren't aware of ticks and we were not checking for ticks. And you certainly didn't think there were any ticks where you ever lived, right? So it's not like you were given any educational support to lead you to believe that you should be protecting yourself on hikes or checking yourself daily, or and you're also somebody who also loves animals, right? And we know from our research that you're an enthusiast about pets and dogs in particular. And anyone who is coming in contact with dogs on a regular basis has a high probability that they're going to come in contact with ticks. I can actually hold one up. My dog Hazel had one last week, and so November in New York is still tick season because Hazel came in with a tick. And and we put this up on our Instagram to let people know that you still have to be vigilant with your tick checks, which of course you weren't, because you didn't think you can get Lyme disease. But like so many people, Crystal, right? There is this gap in time between when you likely came in contact with the germs that were spit into you by the bite and the time that you had gotten sick, right? So you were young, you were healthy, you were able to manage, your body was able to manage the bacteria. You were even able to get implants in and your body could still manage it. But now we start to live a more stressful life, right? You're living in a place where your decisions are not your own, that you're living in a very structured environment that you didn't necessarily structure yourself. And now, of course, you find that there's $2 million of mold remediation that needs to be done, which of course is sort of like the whole world coming together of all the things that could make you sick. The mold is probably the most immunosuppressant experience that you could have had, and then you crash, right?
Yeah, definitely crashed.
So talk to us about what it was like to work with Dr. Lehman, and what types of things was she having you do so that you could begin to manage this very difficult disease that you were diagnosed with?
From what I remember, for about a year, I was on maybe 6 different antibiotics at once for 6 weeks at a time. And then I do like a 2-week break and then do different ones for 6 more weeks, do a 2-week break. And that went on for about a year. And at the end of it, I felt a little bit better, but maybe that's because I was dousing myself in all this stuff and taking the adrenal and the creams and the thyroid. But I definitely was still sick after a year. And Dr. Lehman recommended that the next step was the port, so that I could start having the antibiotics intravenously. And at that time I thought, okay, there's got to be something else where I don't have to have the port. There's got to be something else. And around that time, there was a new stem cell clinic that's in Germany and was coming to Beverly Hills called Infusio. And I heard that Yolanda Foster or Hadid or whatever her last name is these days, she went to Infusio, and so I just thought I'd give it a try. I looked up other stories. I think Kelly Osbourne went around the same time or a little bit before, so I decided to try stem cells.
So Crystal, I'm curious to hear, what do you think gave you better symptom relief? Do you think it was the explant surgery? Because you mentioned you had almost an immediate relief of some of your symptoms after that, but then you did a 1-year treatment with Dr. Lehman again afterwards, and you mentioned you had just some symptom relief there. So what was better for you, the explant surgery or the 1 year of aggressive antibiotic treatment with Dr. Lehman?
I think it was a combination of both. I think it was a combination of taking down a lot of the bacteria load with antibiotics with Lehman, and then taking out the toxic bags so that my immune system could work better to fight the bad bugs.
You did mention, Crystal, earlier that you had to sort of surround yourself around things that made you happy, cut off social media so you wouldn't be stressed, and live a very simple life to heal. So what role do you feel your mental health and stress and the mind plays in healing from Lyme disease?
My gosh, I think the mind can work you up in so many ways, and you don't feel well, and then you like make it worse in your mind, and then stresses out your entire body and keeps you sick. So I definitely think trying to calm the mind and have less stress boosts your immune system and helps it work for you. Instead of panicking about every little thing, I just kind of gave in and trusted that I would get better. And, eventually I did.
Many people, Crystal, don't realize, especially that early on, how important it is to try to live a low stress life while healing. And that was one of the first things I think you mentioned you did. So I think that really helped you put yourself in a position to be primed for healing. And then getting the explant surgery was another major step. And then obviously prepping your body with Lyme with all of the immuno support and the antimicrobial support was another key step. But you weren't getting to where you wanted to be. So you found stem cells. It sounds like you found Infusio in California, and they also obviously had a location in Germany as well.
Yeah.
And you decided to look into stem cells. But stem cells can be really scary, right? I mean, I looked into them many years ago as well. So talk to us about your research and how you decided to move forward despite the potential kind of creepiness of them, to be honest.
Yeah, at first I had no idea, but thinking back to what we just talked about things I did to help, so I just wanted to touch on this really quick. I think diet was really important, like changing my diet. And also, I reevaluated all the people in my life. I'm like, who actually cares about me? Who actually, loves me? Who, where is it like reciprocal? And so I think I narrowed down my friends and then the diet, all that stuff was while I was treating with Lyme. So I think diet really, really, really helped. That was the first time that I ever learned, like, okay, sugar feeds all the bad bacteria, gluten causes inflammation, that also really, really helped. I just wanted to.
No, and thank you, Crystal. And I have a couple of follow-ups for that. So you mentioned obviously sugar feeds the bugs or the bacteria, and gluten can be really bad for inflammation. Now, some people that we have talked with, it's sort of a controversial topic. Some people feel that sometimes you have to feed the bugs, or you have to just have sugar and give in. And some people feel very strongly about that topic, and other people feel that it's really bad to do that. So where do you land in that debate of sometimes you have to just say, you know what, I'm going to have a cheat day and I'm going to eat all the sugar in the world? Do you think that's something that's healthy for somebody that's going through a healing journey, or something that you caution against?
I would caution against it. Well, just from my own personal story, I was so weak. So if I had anything with sugar, I would feel hungover the next day, almost like I was out all night drinking or something, and I didn't even drink. So, because I'm like, okay, if my body's really sick and sensitive and sugar really affects it this way, when I feel better, it still affects it. I just don't notice as much. So I try, it's like a lot of these people that are healthy and they had the standard American diet and, oh, I'm fine, I'm healthy. Well, it catches up. And I believe that with sugar. I believe that it's not good for us. It's not normal. I try and go back to like the simplest of living. And it's like, okay, would we eat sugar every day? Probably not. We'd go find other things.
Many people we talk to, and you're our 226th guest, I believe, that we have interviewed on our podcast, or to be precise, actually 225 to be precise.
Wow.
So a lot of people we talk to, Crystal, tell us that when they first get diagnosed, they really struggle with having a more simple life, meaning low stress, low stimuli to heal. And that actually makes them psychologically or mentally more stressed, but you embrace that. So do you think that your studies in psychology helped you to understand why that was so important in your healing journey, and you had a leg up compared to others in the community in that regard?
I hope so. I think I was just following what was making me feel better mentally, spiritually. I was just like, okay, this feels right. This feels like the right way to go. And I just kept following that and listening to that. I guess the intuition kicked in.
You also mentioned that you chose to cut out friends from your life that were causing you stress and that weren't really a good fit for you while you were healing. And again, we hear the opposite from a lot of people, where they have a hard time letting go of toxic friends, and their friends really gaslight them and abuse them, and they keep going back and trying to maintain these relationships. But you were the one who said, nope, I'm not going to have that, which again was a really positive step in your healing journey. What gave you that strength and knowledge to know you had to do that and really cut out those toxic relationships in order to heal?
Well, I think it's really hard to keep them because not only are you like having to convince and tell yourself all these things, that you're having to convince and tell everybody else, you know, that you're really sick, or you really just need somebody to be there. Or you can tell when you talk to someone and then they don't really believe you, like, oh, okay. Yeah, oh, so it's like, okay, I just need to get these people clear out because this is really happening right now. And, you know, it's all for the better. And I hope people can get rid of toxic people. It makes you lighter and definitely helps you heal.
And Crystal, I think that's really important advice. And many people in the Lyme community are people pleasers, and they feel like they're failing their friends, and they keep trying to latch on. So I think that this is really good advice you're giving people that are listening to this podcast. But on the other side, how do the people that you cut out of your life react to you saying, basically, I'm done?
I think I couldn't worry about it. I really couldn't. I just had to move on and not worry about it, and just, you know, not really, because I think if you just, a lot of times you have to be selfish, especially when you're really sick, and do things for yourself. Otherwise, you're just like in this mental downward spiral, and the whole point in trying to heal is to go up. So I definitely think you just can't worry about it. And I'm a people pleaser, and it's like I was at the mansion with Hef and making sure he was okay and everything's great, and I, you know, completely lost myself. So I had to like do a 180. I had no other choice.
Crystal, did Dr. Lehman have you on anything for your nervous system? Because many of us get stuck in fight or flight, which is a common reaction to Lyme disease. Were you working on your nervous system prior to stem cells as well?
I wasn't working on it prior. She did recommend, you know, certain things. I remember I did take some CBD. I remember, you know, she recommended Annie Hopper, the program, DNRS, which I'm only to this day starting. So, you know, it's so much. Sometimes you're just like, okay, I give up. I need a break. But I'm just starting Annie Hopper now.
So let's go back to the stem cells. So they kind of reminded you of a science experiment, cloning or artificial intelligence. And I had the same reaction when I started to research them too when I was really sick. So what allowed you to overcome those fears of stem cells and the newness of stem cells to actually move forward with stem cell therapy?
Well, when I very first thought of stem cells, you know, you don't have any idea. So I'm like, oh, is it like cloning? Do people end up with like two heads? Like, I don't know. So, you know, the research I did, I just tried my best to, you know, make good judgment. Other success stories from people. I think I read something about Mel Gibson's dad was like, you know, went to Panama and was so much better, and it gets rid of all the inflammation. And so I thought, okay, well, at least I can maybe heal from all this, you know, the antibiotics kills all the good bacteria as well. Maybe it can repair something. And that was my only choice really at the time. Like, this is the only thing that could possibly help me. And so I signed up, paid, you know, I think it was $25,000 at the time, which, you know, I know it's really steep. And it was like a 2-week, you know, they load you with kind of different bags of stuff to optimize for the stem cells. Then I had the procedure. I think the doctor there was learning at the time. So, you know, during the procedure, there was some little parts that weren't numb, but it all ended up being worth it. You know, I had to sign a waiver, like if you get cancer or whatever in 5 years, you know, don't come back to us. But I signed it all. I met one of my dearest friends. I think you guys had her on, Erica Schlick.
Yes. We love Erica.
She's such a good, like a pioneer for everything. She's amazing. But it definitely changed my life and made me feel semi-normal. I'm still not normal, back to like, you know, I dream about the times when
Crystal, are any of us normal? Let's be real. Come on.
I know. Just trying to get as close as I can, but yeah, it really helped me. They said in 100 days you'll get better, like in 3 months, something like that. It was like 90 days, 100 days. So I got the stem cells. I remember you wait there, they take it out, you wait in the waiting room it takes like an hour, and then they bring it in and put it in an IV. They're like, here's all your stem cells, and put it back in. I remember that day feeling like high in my body, just so happy and high, and like, whoa, this is cool. Is this what like normal people feel like? It felt like better than normal. But then I kind of went back to the same kind of thing, and I'm waiting 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 100 days, still not better. Like, oh man, what a waste. And I just went along just hoping. And then around month 9, the symptoms just started melting away. I just almost like kind of forgot about it. I'm like, oh, I had an ice cream and it did nothing. And like, whoa, it was amazing. It definitely helped me more than anything else.
So I think the lesson here is patience. And it sounds like at first you were getting anxious that you weren't going to get better, but at about the 9-month mark, you were like, wow, this is really becoming a game changer.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And then around a little while after that, Hef passed away. And that was hard because I was sick and then he got unexpectedly sick, and that was really hard. He passed away. I couldn't leave the house for so long. And my friend was like, let's go travel somewhere. Just let's go to Africa. So I'm like, while I'm feeling okay, I'm going to do as much as I can. So I started traveling and I haven't really stopped.
So Crystal, I love the fact that you're a travel blogger, and Rich is going to talk to you about that in a second, but you just made a comment that you said, while I'm feeling better, I want to do what I can. Did you have beliefs then that you were going to get really sick again?
Absolutely. I thought it was temporary, definitely temporary. I'm like, okay, this is while I'm as good as it's going to get. I wasn't 100%, but while it's as good as it's going to get, I'm going to do as much as I can. Because while I was sick, I couldn't do anything. I could barely even lift my arms. I could barely walk. It's like fire down my back. And I remember I loved Disneyland. And one day I had to be in a wheelchair in Disneyland because I just couldn't walk. Like everything would tweak out of place and, be so exhausting. But luckily things would tweak and I'd sleep and wake back up and it would kind of repair itself overnight, but it's just so weird. Like Lyme is so, oh my gosh. But yeah, I definitely thought it was temporary.
Okay, so it sounds like you got back to maybe 80-90% of your pre-illness health from the stem cells. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes.
And has that maintained itself since you've gotten the stem cells? Has that been a pretty level set, or have you had any sort of setbacks since then?
Setbacks, but not as bad as, I'm thinking about maybe doing it again. It's nowhere near as bad as it was. Like I know what it is to, what it's like to, be a person with Lyme disease at the very worst. And I know what it is like now having it and, being able to still do things. But, I post all these travels and all these Instagram things, but that's only a small percentage of the time. Most of the time I haven't left my house in 5 days. So it's, definitely not, a lot now I think is in my mind. It's like, I think a lot of the neurological Lyme, I still have weird symptoms like whooshing or like zaps or waking up in the middle of the night, like in a panic, not knowing where I am. And, that's when I'm starting the anti-hopper, and maybe that will help a little bit.
So Crystal, when you have these setbacks, it sounds like and obviously they're not nearly as bad as it was when you were pretty much at your worst, when you couldn't even lift your arms as you described it. Are you doing anything or treating with anybody to help address these setbacks, or are you just sort of doing natural stuff to kind of bounce back?
Well, the doctor I'm with now is Dr. Horowitz in New York, and I'm in LA, so he just kind of helps me by phone, and sometimes if I'm there, I see him. But we did another treatment, and I told him, like, I really don't want to take antibiotics, so I tried the Dapsone, or what is it? No,
the Dapsone. Oh, disulfiram, yes.
Yeah, the disulfiram, and that the Herxing there was probably one of the worst I've ever had. But
how long were you on that for, Crystal?
A few weeks, but he said, it's strong, just start small, or start, really tiny little dose once a week and then kind of move it up. But I'm like, I'm going to kick its ass. And I did, and day 5, I'm like, oh, I got hit by a truck. And then after that, I started having like almost like psychosis. So I had to stop. But the day I stopped, I felt great. If I do it again, I think I'll just do smaller doses. But I'm much better, but I think it took a whole life change.
So disulfiram, is it something, looking back, that you would still do, knowing what you went through? Was something you'd recommend?
It's something I definitely recommend. I think it works well. I would recommend it, but I would recommend very, very tiny dose. Like work yourself up very slowly, like even slower than the doctor told me.
You mentioned psychosis, Crystal, and that is a that is a side effect or a known symptom of taking disulfiram too aggressively. So it sounds like you may have taken it too hard, too fast, right? And then gotten the psychosis, but it was effective in treating your symptoms. So I think that's a good warning that you're giving to our listeners here. Yeah. Now, I do want to follow up because I do know that you recently, just this year, probably a couple of months ago, got diagnosed with this long QT syndrome, which is a heart condition. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, we actually interviewed Colonel Nicole Malachowski about 2 months ago, who is a brilliant advocate in the community. And she told us that she was diagnosed with long QT syndrome as well. And it's actually caused from Lyme disease. So have you discussed that with your doctors, that long QT is actually a consequence or a result of having severe Lyme disease?
Wow, that's really interesting. When I would on different I don't know what's it called when they like scan your heart. EKG? EKG or sometimes they call it EKG. I don't know. But they would say, oh, you have long QT, you have long QT. Before I was with Dr. Horowitz, he gave me that and said, oh, you have long QT. There's certain medications we can't give you. And then I went to Florida and I was going to get this EBO2 procedure where it's like the plate, yes. I forgot what it's called, regenerative something in Florida. Well, when they pulled the blood out, when it was getting cleaned, I fainted. I ended up going to the ER. I didn't end up having the treatment, but in the ER, they're like, oh, you have this long QT, you better check it out. So I went back to LA, saw a professional here for long QT, like, oh, you have this long QT. It was really scary. And when I researched it, it said that you only live 10 years if you have it. And it was like, oh my gosh, now this, like what? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to find the #1 specialist for this, like in the country. And I found Michael Ackerman, and he's at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. So I went there and did all the tests. And he said, be careful of all the medications for long QT. I see that you have long QT, but it's not as severe, or doesn't follow the same format as regular long QT. And what he thinks happened is that I have this, like a lot of people have this genetic heart marker that is nothing. It's called KCN something. It doesn't affect anybody really, but because of the aggressive Lyme treatment and the antibiotics, it triggered it into long QT. So that's what he told me happened. So now I have to, check the website every time I'm about to take medications, called crediblemeds.org. And when I look up what you can't take with the long QT, Cipro is on it, Z-Pak, a lot of, and I was taking Cipro for 6 weeks, and I would take Cipro younger for urinary tract things. Cipro is a whole nother thing because I think I have like permanent nerve damage from taking Cipro. But a lot of those antibiotics trigger the long QT. And I think a lot of Lyme patients take a lot of antibiotics that can trigger the long QT for sure.
Yeah, we actually found, Crystal, on the CDC website, and we can send you the link, where it was discussing how the Lyme bacteria itself can cause or activate the long QT, but also, as you noted, a lot of the treatments too, right? A lot of the antibiotics can also trigger it. So it's the question, what, is it chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah.
Which one caused it, the treatment or the Lyme?
Yeah. Did the Lyme cause it in me? I don't know. It sucks. And I feel so bad for anyone that has to go through this because, life is hard and scary and all those things without any of this. So it's really, it's really unfortunate. Sad.
With Dr. Horowitz, and since you finished the stem cell therapy, has there been anything else you've done that's been noteworthy to share with our listeners? It's been helpful in your healing journey, or even with battling a flare or just having a good quality of life? I
think I have to continue to keep things simple. I have to try and do more things that I really like, and try not to stress out too much. I know a lot of things can trigger, like even hot showers can make, it's like tiring. So you put the water down to more of a lukewarm. And I did have an infrared sauna. I try and move. I try and go on walks. I try and exercise because for some reason, I feel like if I'm moving and it's shifting around and maybe helping getting some toxins out, or maybe helping me feel better. But I definitely think it's hard because it's like exercise, but then a lot of people can't. So, even just like a little walk or being out in the sun. Yeah, I just try not to get overwhelmed. I try not to stress about anything.
And I think it's such an important lesson, and it's so simple, but honestly, I forget it all the time. Try not to be overwhelmed. Try to keep life simple. When you're stressed, we know your body releases cortisol, which prevents your body from healing. So, but talk to us about the exercise part of it, or the movement, because as you noted, many people in the Lyme community have exercise intolerances. And how do you balance the movement that is so necessary to maintain your level of health, but also not overdoing it, so you're not sitting in bed for 2 weeks because you push your body too hard?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at that stage, I think stretching, even just stretching, if you're not, just try and stretch a little bit. I would put yoga on YouTube and kind of follow along as best I could. And, I think that helps to get things kind of moving. It's like I would have like a stiff neck for so long, but then if I just try to like move, it would go way faster. So things like that, I think.
So, Crystal, my final question before Rich takes it back over is, give us an idea as to how much you've healed since you've been at your worst. You kind of gave us a glimpse. When you're at your worst, you couldn't lift your arms, you were being pushed around in a wheelchair. What are you doing today? I mean, obviously we follow you on social media, so we see all the amazing things you've been doing these past few months, and we're so jealous of all your awesome activities and admiring from a distance. So, but share with us, some of the things you're doing now that you never dreamed of doing when you were at your worst.
Oh my gosh, traveling. I just went to Egypt. A lot before, I'm like, okay, I can't really go too far in case something happens. I need to be near the doctors. But, now I bring a little extra things in case I need it. I bring the Pedialyte and make sure I'm always hydrated. And, I was in Egypt and the Maldives and, going to more remote places. And, that was really fun. And, it does look very active on social media, but there are days where it's like, okay, I just was in a hotel room, like for a few days doing absolutely nothing, just ordering, room service. And so it's just kind of a balance, rest, and then have fun while I can.
So, Crystal, I want to talk to you now about your journey of transformation, right? And I guess the first question I'm going to ask you is, you said that your intuition told you had to shed yourself of all this baggage that you had gathered. But I'm wondering, as you were gathering the baggage, whether it be toxic people or activity on social media, or taking the responsibilities and the stresses that you were taking at the mansion, and ultimately, the breast implants, as you were going through that process of sort of picking up all of this unhealthy baggage, were your intuition speaking to you then? Was your gut telling you that you shouldn't have the breast implants, you shouldn't be surrounding yourself with toxic people? Were you getting those signals early on, and were you ignoring them, or were you not getting the signals?
I think I was getting the signals and ignoring them. Being at the mansion and having the implants and doing all the things everyone did at the mansion. And it's like, okay, this doesn't really feel like me. This, bleach blonde hair, everything fake, this doesn't feel like me. And it took getting sick to really change. So I think that was the blessing of getting sick, is that I had the chance to really reevaluate my life and what's important. And, some people, it takes longer for them to do that, if ever. So that was the blessing that definitely came out of being sick.
So we've had guests in the past tell us, and one of our guests actually calls that process of listening to your body confidence. So you're getting signals and you're listening to them. And we've had actually some guests tell us that they've lost touch with their signals, that they lost touch with their feelings because of the illness and the gaslighting and the medical trauma and so many other things. But it sounds like you always kept in touch with your signals and you ignored them, but you knew that they were telling you what they were telling you. And finally, when you had gotten sick, it was sort of Atlas throwing off the world from her shoulders. And now you were in touch with and in tune with your body confidence, and you were listening to your signals, and you were doing all the things that your intuition was telling you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think being at the mansion, like my inner voice got, quietened or shut off, but, I ended up like fighting my way back to it. And I think that's definitely the most important.
certainly the most important part of your healing journey, right? If you didn't start listening, if you didn't start following what your body was telling you to do, you wouldn't have gotten any better. In fact, you thought you were going to die, and that's how far along it had gotten with you ignoring what your body confidence was telling you to do.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk about modeling, because that's another really important part of a journey, right? And it looks like you were modeling some of the people who were being vulnerable and open about their experience, specifically Yolanda Hadid or Yolanda Foster, whatever her name is that you had said before at this point, right? And on at least two different occasions, you followed her model. The first is you went to the same explant surgeon that she went to, because that was an important part of her journey and it became a part of yours. And then you also went to the same clinic where she had gotten her, or you had gotten the implants of the stem cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were two of the largest turns in your journey, two of the most important parts of your journey, and you got that by modeling someone else who was very public and vulnerable about her experience. So first, I'd like you to talk about modeling other people who have been successful. And secondly, I'd like you to talk to us about whether that inspired you to be as public as you have been and as vulnerable as you have been with your experiences.
It really helps to have somebody to model after, for sure. It really helps to have somebody that's like, okay, I did this and it really worked, because it still was like a wild, wild west to me. You don't know, there's so many options of treatments you could do. So it really helped me. So I wanted to be that person in return, especially for removing implants, because I thought, okay, here I am, like, Playboy, married to Hugh Hefner, and she's getting this completely taken out. She got sick. You really don't need this to be beautiful. And she's telling you which doctor she went to and all of her symptoms so that you could see if you have them too. Because when I first started on the journey of the breast implants, it was a comment on Instagram that was like, I think that's, I had gone to Erica Lehman to ask her about that, because I was getting these comments. They're like, oh, it could be your implants. Could you ever? Never thought of it. Never thought of that. And then I did, that's when the conversation came up with Erica Lehman about, yeah, if you want to go all the way better, you need to remove them. So I was very, very public about my journey, because I knew it was something not me to begin with. I knew it was something that I did under pressure, or feeling like I'd, be more loved, or get more attention, or be more of something, and less of myself if I got them. So I want people to know, like, hey, you're good just as you are. You don't need to do this. If you do this, you could get really sick. If you're already really sick, this is what you can do about it. And ever since then, I get so many women every day writing me, thank you so much. I went to Dr. Fang, I went to this other doctor, I'm so much better, thank you. And for me, that feels like purpose more than anything in my life before that. I mean, more than anything at the mansion.
So, Crystal, I'd like to end this podcast in the same way we began it, by thanking you for being so public and being so vulnerable, because you benefited from another person or some other people who were vulnerable and public about their experience. And because of that, your treatment journey and your healing journey was shortened. And now you're doing exactly the same thing by being public and vulnerable. So I can't thank you enough for being open and public and sharing so much with the community, because you are shortening other people's journeys and you're making them have a much better life. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you as well. It's because of people like you that everyone, it's like everyone's getting on that train. And I've been hearing things of, new treatments or new options that are coming down the line. And it's because of you and everyone's voices. It's getting louder, and it's awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Tick Bootcamp interview with our guest, Crystal Hefner. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Crystal Hefner, please visit our Instagram page at Crystal Hefner. Second, if you enjoyed this episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share with your friends by using the social media buttons you see at the bottom of our post. Third, Tick Bootcamp has created a Tick Bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been shared with us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at tickbootcamp.com to view the blueprint. Please note we would appreciate any input or any improvements you would like to offer to us. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, we thank you, our community, for your comments on our past podcast episodes. Please take a minute to leave us an honest review on Apple Podcasts, on Instagram, or on our website. We make it a point to read every single one of the reviews you share with us. Thank you, as always, for listening.